Marisela Botello Valadez was born on January 29, 1997. She lived with her family and younger brother and was working hard towards becoming a nutritionist. Growing up in a loving family, Marisela had become a young woman who made her family proud. According to her mother, she was also very friendly. Marisela had booked a return flight from Texas to Seattle for October 5, 2020. The 23-year-old had been visiting her ex-boyfriend, Luis Ortiz, and had spent a week with him. But as the plane prepared for takeoff, Marisela was not among the passengers, marking the start of a frantic search filled with worry. When her family realized Marisela was missing, they immediately contacted her boyfriend in Texas, asking why she hadn't returned as planned. Luis Ruiz explained that Marisela hadn't come back to the apartment the previous night and that he had no idea where she was. He said they had spent the evening together, and when they got back home drunk, they realized they had lost their keys. His roommate wasn't home either, so he ended up falling asleep at the door while waiting. Marisela, however, didn't want to wait outside and decided to go back into the city to continue having fun. She left Luis's place around 1 a.m. in a taxi. Security camera footage obtained by the police showed Marisela walking with an unknown man before the two headed toward a car. The vehicle was identified as a black 2014 Audi A3. Unfortunately, Marisela had gotten into this man's car. Detectives focused on Marisela's digital footprint and found no transactions on her credit or debit cards. During this time, her phone had also been inactive. From the beginning of the investigation, all signs pointed to an abduction. Further footage revealed that Marisela and the driver of the black Audi were seen entering a convenience store later that night. Marisela appeared to be in good spirits, and the footage showed no indication that she was being held against her will or forced to go anywhere. The investigation led police to identify the driver of the Audi as 31-year-old Charles Beltran, also known as Chuck. Chuck was an aspiring rapper who worked various jobs to make ends meet. He had been working as a bouncer at a club near where he met Marisela and had a troubled past. He had been convicted of unarmed robbery and had served 2.5 years in prison for theft. When Marisela's location history was examined, her last known location matched the registered address of the Audi. FBI Detective Taylor Page, in collaboration with the sheriff's office, set out for Charles's residence. But when they arrived, they were met with an eerie silence. They then obtained the lease agreement for the house and discovered it belonged to a tenant named Lisa Dukes. Lisa, when reached by Detective Taylor, stated that she hadn't seen Charles for weeks and that their relationship was purely that of a tenant and landlord. She claimed she had no way of reaching him and no idea where he might be. However, these answers did not satisfy the detective. At this point, a search warrant was issued, and they went to Lisa's house to investigate Marisela's last known location. Upon entering, they were met with a strange sight. The cabinet doors were left open. Garbage and belongings were scattered everywhere. A mattress was propped up against the wall in the hallway. It seemed as though the occupants had left in a hurry, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. Each detail deepened the detectives' suspicions even further. The forensics team meticulously examined every corner of the house, using luminol spray to detect invisible traces of blood. In the bathtub, a small area began to glow blue, indicating the presence of blood that had once been spilled there. However, the most significant clue was hidden in the guest room, a space that had once belonged to Charles and was now marked by the past. The carpet on the floor appeared to have been superficially cleaned, but chemical analyses revealed that the cleaning had only been done on the surface. Samples taken by the crime scene investigation team confirmed that the blood belonged to Marisela Botello. Yet the oddities did not end there. The carpet also revealed traces of blood from 2 other unidentified individuals. The detective's priority was to locate Lisa Dykes, the name listed on the lease, and question her about Marisela. Lisa Dykes, a 50-year-old successful attorney, had been a respected figure in the legal community for many years. Her youngest child was 20 years old, and she had reportedly convinced her daughter to move to Florida because she wanted to bring Charles into the house. A colleague mentioned that Lisa had made the decision to remove her children from the home rather suddenly, as she wanted to live the life she dreamed of, a life that included 31-year-old Charles Beltran. Charles, who aspired to be a rapper, had been financially supported by Lisa in obtaining a studio to pursue his dreams. He also held an important place in her life. According to a friend, Lisa played the role of a sugar mama for Charles and often spoke proudly about it. Lisa had also started making significant changes to her appearance. For instance, she began getting tattoos, cutting her hair short, and dyeing it bright colors. She lost around 130 pounds and underwent facelifting and cosmetic surgeries to tighten her jawline and legs. All of these changes had a single purpose: to please Charles. By 2019, they decided to add a new thrill to their relationship, and Lisa took the initiative. She married her 48-year-old friend, Nina Morano, who was a widowed attorney. Now, their so-called family consisted of 3 people. After their marriage, Lisa and Nina had to choose a new last name, and unsurprisingly, they rejected their own surnames and opted for Beltran. Hours after Marisela's disappearance, the phones of these 3, Lisa, Nina, and Charles, were all pinged in the vicinity of the house. Following this discovery, detectives issued an arrest warrant for Charles Beltran, Lisa Dykes, and Nina Morano on charges of aggravated murder. Phone records from the night of October 5th showed that Lisa and Nina had traveled to a heavily wooded area in southern Dallas. Throughout November, detectives continued searching this area, hoping to find remains, but unfortunately, they found nothing. However, 5 months later, in March 2021, a person exploring the wooded area stumbled upon what looked like a human skull. Believing it to be a skull, they immediately notified the police, and soon the discovery was confirmed. Through dental records, the skull was identified as belonging to Marisela Botello Valadez. Due to the damage caused by natural conditions, it was impossible to determine the cause of death from the remains. From May to December, Lisa and Nina complied with their parole conditions, but they had other plans for Christmas morning. Both of their ankle monitors were deactivated within a span of about 4 minutes, taking advantage of the holiday period to disappear. Their plan worked. Within 2 days, they managed to vanish, and it wasn't until the 27th that the authorities realized they were missing. During this time, Lisa and Nina had boarded a plane, traveled nearly 9,000 miles to South Korea, and then continued to Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia. The Cambodian immigration office confirmed the pair had entered the country, but stated that Phnom Penh was their final destination and they had not traveled elsewhere. With the FBI rejoining the investigation, cooperation with Cambodian authorities was established, and cash withdrawals made by the 2 women were tracked. With the help of local officials, the address where Lisa and Nina were staying was identified, and they were apprehended once more. They were extradited to Texas, where they were held in custody, and their trial dates were set for 2023. Both women denied the murder charges against them. While it was clear that the 2 women and Charles had been involved in the murder, it was crucial to determine exactly what had transpired that night in the house. Just days before Lisa Dykes' trial, Charles contacted the prosecution and offered to cooperate, proposing to share his version of the events. According to Charles, he and Marisela were together in the house when Lisa and Nina returned home late at night. Without saying a word, Lisa attacked Marisela and began stabbing her. By the time Nina entered the room, it was already too late. Realizing Marisela was no longer alive, Charles said he panicked and fled the house, leaving the 3 women behind. Lisa's defense attorneys argued that she had no motive to kill Marisela, asserting there had been no prior connection between them. They insisted Lisa was not a jealous person, pointing out that Charles had brought other women to the house in the past without provoking any anger from Lisa. The prosecution had a strong witness, Kathy DeLong, Lisa's longtime hairstylist. Kathy testified that Lisa had once told her that she came home from work to find Charles and Nina in bed together, and in recounting the incident, Lisa had said, "I could kill her." Kathy added, "I had never seen Lisa so upset. She was always calm, but that day, she was really distressed." Another compelling witness was a realtor who mentioned the panic Lisa and Nina exhibited when trying to sell the house. He noted that, unlike usual, all the curtains in the house were closed that day. The prosecution's key witness, however, was Charles Beltran himself. He had given detectives multiple versions of the story, but finally settled on one to present to the jury. Initially, he claimed that Marisela had gotten into his car but that they hadn't gone to the house. Later, he stated that Marisela had come to the house but left unharmed. In yet another version, he alleged that Lisa stabbed Marisela, with Nina joining the attack upon entering the room. Finally, Charles claimed he had asked Lisa to call the police, but she refused. Fearing the crime would be pinned on him, he grabbed his belongings and left the house. Charles's cell phone location data supported his account of leaving the house and going to his ex-girlfriend's home the next morning. Meanwhile, defense attorneys questioned the identity of the two other blood profiles found at the scene. The police had assumed they belonged to Charles, Lisa, and Nina, but test results disproved this assumption. In their closing arguments, the prosecutors highlighted Lisa's lies, pointing out that she had repeatedly denied any romantic or sexual relationship with Charles under oath, despite evidence to the contrary. Lisa Dykes was tried for the murder of Marisela Botello and found guilty by the jury. She was sentenced to life in prison for murder and an additional 20 years for evidence tampering. Charles Beltran and Nina Morano had been charged with murder from the outset of the case, but the prosecution later dropped the charges due to insufficient evidence against them. As a result, Lisa Dykes was the only one to receive a murder conviction. However, Charles and Nina were found guilty of evidence tampering and are set to be tried on these charges later this year. Before we dive into our next story, if you could take a moment to hit that like button, it would mean the world to us. A single click for you is a huge boost of encouragement for us. Katarzyna Zowada was born on June 1, 1975, in Krakow, Poland. By 1998, Katarzyna was a 23-year-old university student nearing the completion of her degree in religious studies. Initially, she had decided to study psychology, then switched to history, before finally settling on religious studies. In 1996, she experienced a tragic event that would profoundly affect her life. While on a walk with her father, he took a misstep while climbing a hill, fell from a great height, and broke his spine, leading to his death. Katarzyna was very close to her father, and his sudden loss plunged her into deep depression. She began seeing a psychiatrist, feeling guilty for not being able to save him that day. She believed that if they had never gone on that walk, the tragedy would not have occurred. Around October 1998, Katarzyna took a break from her university studies and began receiving treatment for depression at a hospital. While the exact reason for this treatment is unclear, it was believed to be related to her deteriorating mental health. On November 12, 1998, Katarzyna left home to go to the hospital for her treatment and was supposed to meet her mother there. Her mother waited for her at the agreed time, but Katarzyna never showed up, and her mother's worry quickly grew. Sadly, Katarzyna was never seen again. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, until January 6, 1999, the day of a chilling discovery that would reveal what had happened to her. The crew of a boat moving along the Vistula River noticed something had become entangled in the propeller. The officer inspecting the propeller was met with a dense, disturbing smell he had never encountered before. Upon closer examination, they found a piece of human skin with an ear still attached. Parts of a body were tangled in the propeller, bringing the boat to a near standstill. The crew immediately reported the discovery to the police. Initially, it was believed that a body had been dumped into the river and then torn apart by the propeller. However, as the remains were further examined, the horrifying truth emerged. The body had been deliberately dismembered, and the skin had been expertly removed. The limbs and head had been cut off, and the skin had been treated as if it were a piece of clothing. Polish authorities, needing international assistance to solve this gruesome crime, collaborated with Portuguese and American experts. It was soon determined that the skin belonged to Katarzyna Zowada, who had been reported missing. It was discovered that the young woman had been held captive, tortured, and skinned alive. The official cause of death was blood loss, and numerous stab wounds were found on her body. The killer had meticulously removed the skin with extreme precision. Despite their efforts, the police initially failed to find significant leads in the murder investigation and feared the case would become a cold case. However, in the early 2000s, with the advent of new technologies, the case was reopened and some clues emerged about what had happened to Katarzyna. Plant material found on Katarzyna's body was native to a remote area, suggesting she had been held there. Additionally, the bruises on her skin indicated that her attacker might have been trained in martial arts. In 2017, nearly 20 years after the grisly discovery, an anonymous letter arrived at the police station. According to the letter's author, Katarzyna's killer was a 52-year-old man named Robert Janczewski. Initially, the police were skeptical about the letter, but they decided to interrogate Robert anyway. They went to his house and asked him a few questions about Katarzyna. Robert reacted harshly, stating he didn't know who Katarzyna was and didn't understand why he was a suspect. He refused to offer any further assistance and sent the officers away empty-handed. However, the police found his behavior highly suspicious. They began a more in-depth investigation into Robert's background. At the time, he was living with his mother and was subjected to both physical and emotional abuse. In the 1990s, he had been assaulted twice, and following these incidents, he decided to train in martial arts. He later joined the army. Additionally, he had studied at a zoological institute to gain knowledge of animal skins, including how to flay them and remove organs. Robert's expertise in this area only heightened suspicions about his involvement in Katarzyna Zowada's death. The police described him as a deeply disturbing man. Following these revelations, the police searched his home again and found traces of blood in the bathroom. 20 years after the fact, a truth was uncovered. Despite the time that had passed, the blood was identified as Katarzyna's. They had found the person they were looking for. Furthermore, a journal kept by Robert was discovered in the house. It detailed his obsessive stalking of women and described how he harassed them. Robert, however, claimed innocence and argued that the journal had been planted by someone else. But the evidence gathered was sufficient for a trial. Robert Janczewski was found guilty of the murder of Katarzyna Zowada and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before we conclude this video, please be aware that the video on the left may be disturbing. It is recommended for adult viewing only. On the right, you'll find a playlist of videos that have been highly appreciated by our viewers.